Hi, and welcome back to 9-Hole Reviews. We're starting a brand new series called The Art of Tactical Painting. My name is Chinese Bob Ross, and welcome to the show. So today we're going to talk about how to paint your AR-15 rifle. AR-15s are a little bit different from other rifles in the sense that it is a closed system, which in some ways makes it easier to paint. In some ways it's a little bit more different because of the small pieces, and we'll talk about that. I'm getting ahead of myself. To start your project, these are my recommendations. Spray paint. I would highly recommend using flat spray paint. Don't go ultra flat. We'll talk about that in a bit. So for this particular build, if you look at it, there's a base color and a surface color. I deliberately chose to use OD green on top of FDE. You'll see that the dark color coats on top of the FDE without it bleeding through. A lot easier than if you use OD green as a base color and a light color on top. You would also potentially want aircraft remover. This is what I call an insurance policy. Again, we'll go over that in a bit. You could also use masking tape. This is a highly recommended item. Now, we're not in Rhodesia, so the brushes, we won't need it today. One last thing that I would highly recommend you get is some type of paper. The larger the better. Newspaper works just fine as well. This is packing paper, we'll be using that. Now it depends on what you want out of your rifle. Do you want it to just blend in or do you want it to look badass? Personally, I just wanted it to look badass and blend in well. Now we start the rifle off by degreasing it. That's, again, what I do. You don't have to. If you are in a time crunch or if you're in a war zone and you don't have the necessities, of course, skip the degrease part. But for me, it makes me happy. So I degreased the rifle and I laid it all out, so I let the degreaser dry. The next thing is I disassembled everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything. All the small parts were taken off and all the big parts were laid aside. Now, as you're using masking tape, I would highly recommend using a pair of scissors with it. Now, I taped over the holes that had critical mating surfaces. That means all of the pivot holes and all the little small pins that go into the receiver. And I did this deliberately so I wouldn't impede the functionality of the rifle. Now, if you don't have the time to do that, that's okay too. You can paint over that. But for me, I didn't like that. I don't like handling sticky nubs and I don't like handling sticky selectors, so of course I wouldn't paint them. If that's something that you would like to do, or if you don't have time, that's all right. You can just spray all over that and use it as intended. Your pistol grip, your stock tube, there's a lot of forgiveness there. That's not so much of a worry. So we've masked our item and we're getting ready to spray. First of all, I take it and I put a base spray on it. Now the base paint that I'm using initially was the Krylon Ultra Flat. This did not work very well. Not that it didn't go on, but once it went on, the Krylon Ultra Flat had a tendency of flaking. You really don't want this as the final result. So after I sprayed it on, I took it back and I unleashed a whole series of curse words on my workbench. And I came back and got some of this aircraft remover, and you'll see how well it works. Now, aircraft remover just straight pulls the paint off of whatever surface it's on. Now, sometimes polymer is okay. Not all polymer is okay with it. Some of them will melt. Rubber is one of those that does not react well with it. However, anodized aluminum, perfectly fine. If we're talking about handguards that will be painted anyways, and you're not worried about the finish, go ahead and use aircraft remover if you need it. I like it because it's a nice insurance policy knowing that the first spray paint that I use doesn't have to be permanent. And so I have the confidence of moving on if I need to. Now, after I stripped the old color off, I went back and I got RUSTOLEUM and I sprayed it on. RUSTOLEUM was much nicer. It's much more pleasant to the eyes and to the feel. The most important thing was I could layer it without the flakiness of the previous color on the ultra flat. Now after you spray your base color, I highly recommend you take a moment, don't assemble it just quite yet, let it dry for 24 hours. Yes, this is a timed process, unfortunately. Once it dries for a little bit to where you can touch it and move it about, I peel off the internal masking and put the rifle somewhat together. Not entirely together, the critical parts are still out. So once I put the base coat rifle together, I start spraying the OD green on top. Now I don't just tiger stripe it. Some guys like to tiger stripe it, I don't. What I do, I take the paper and I rip it into a pattern to where I can use that as a mask. It is always easier to control a mask than it is a tiger stripe. Now as I masked it, sometimes I would back it off a little bit and then give a lighter brush. That way it gives it an easier transition. It depends on how you would like your pattern to look, and I'll leave that up to you. For me, I was happy with how it turned out. Now once I put the OD layer on, I let the rifle sit for about half an hour before moving it to a drying location. Give it another 24 hours for it to dry after the last coat, and it's ready to assemble. Now, if you want the paint to last a little bit longer, it's okay to just leave it in the safe for another week. But if you wanted to take it to the range, you can too. Just know that if you take it to the range within the first week, it's going to peel off a lot faster. Now some guys like their rifles to look battle worn, and they purposely wear it down. It's entirely up to you. Me, I wouldn't recommend it. I think training is the best way of getting a battle worn look. Just understand that your rifle is a tool. Thank you again for tuning in to 9-Hole Reviews. And again, this is a brand new installment of The Art of Tactical Painting. We'll see you on the range. Masterpiece.
716 is Steel 96, 4 Vic, 8 packs, Redcon 1, green to green. How copy, over?
Steel 96, this is 716, roger, over. Last thing.